How walkable is Kigali, Rwanda? I'm currently a student at the African Leadership University, but I was born and raised in Berlin in Germany. Throughout the last years, I've increasingly submerged myself in the urbanist bubble of thought one could consider me train-pulled. Often, however, it feels like this bubble only exists in North America and Western Europe, disregarding developments in other parts of the world. So what is it actually like here, and how does it compare? So the first thing that would influence Kigali's cityscape are the hills. No matter where you are, almost everywhere has a stunning view. But that is not the only thing. Because of how water works, more urban parts, dwellings and markets are usually situated at a higher altitude, whereas valleys, even those next to downtown, are still used as farmland. I think this comes from the fact that when it rains, you wouldn't like your house or business to be flooded, so being on top of a hill obviously helps with drainage as the water flows down into the valleys, where it gets welcomed by the crops that do indeed appreciate being flooded every now and then. Another way hills influence Kigali is by preventing pretty much any gridification. It's just kinda hard to construct a straight road along a steep incline. It also discourages bigger roads since you will have to remove more material to build a 4-lane road compared with just 2 lanes. Indeed, most of the roads only have 2 lanes. This lack of space of course helps in calming traffic and helping walkability, but sidewalks don't tend to get a lot of attention within this limited space either. Also, the smell is pretty bad. I don't really know why, but Berlin, which has much wider streets with more cars, did not feel as hostile to my lungs. But I guess bigger roads would only make that worse either way. That said, the traffic is reasonable. I think mostly due to 3 factors: buses, motos and bikes. These modes of transport that take up so much less space on cars are the reason that people who have cars can get from A to B in a reasonable amount of time. After all, we know what it is like when everyone drives a car. So let's talk about these options. Kigali has quite the impressive bus network. If I could, I would show a map now, but to my knowledge there's none. This might be due to the fact that the service is mostly privately operated by different groups, so if you want to know how to get from A to B, check the website of the operator that covers it, or just ask the people at the station. That said, the buses are a very popular way to commute, being by far the cheapest option. A ride of 16 kilometers might set you back 30 to 40 cents. In turn, in the morning and evening, wait times could be over an hour depending on your commute. At the same time, during noon, many of the buses are not even operated, just standing around. This is because a bus, in order to make the highest profit, will only start on its road when it is absolutely full, as fares are on a per-ride basis using contactless payment and prepaid cards. So if you're in a hurry, maybe a motorcycle is the better option. It is pretty much immune to traffic and also ubiquitous, so you won't have to walk to a station. For the same 16 kilometers, it will set you back around $1.50 to $3, depending on how stingy you are. In return, you might be 2 to 5 times faster. One interesting thing to mention as well are the now emerging ampersand motors, which are run electrically and have exchangeable batteries. These are quite fast, and whenever I have the time I try to get an ampersand in order not to contribute to the general stinkiness and loudness of the traditional model. Then lastly, there are also bike fares, which are currently mostly a thing in the eastern parts of the city and around the less prosperous areas. These are pretty much like motos, with the difference that you can appreciate your surroundings more because you don't have to wear a big ass helmet with a screen. And you might feel a bit bad about how much lift the biker has to do to get you up that hill. Yeah, the bikes are dying out, and I'd assume that most of these people that currently work like this would switch to a stinky moto any chance they could get. The bike infrastructure as well is lackluster. There are like 2 bike lanes in the city, and the entire official planning document for Kigali doesn't mention bike infrastructure at all really. When I personally once borrowed a bike to cycle from Timinongho to downtown, it felt good when I finally arrived, I'll give it that, but on my way I had to put in some real effort, and when you combine that with the exhaust that you breathe in while gasping for air, I wouldn't recommend cycling in the end. Similarly to many places in North America, cycling here is seen as a sport or as something poor people do when they can't afford a motorcycle. So this bad image probably led to the neglect that cyclists experience here when it comes to infrastructure, creating a vicious cycle of some sorts. But if there's one thing that Kigali really gets right, It's the car-free zones and car-free days. Around the city there are a few strips of pedestrian-only areas. In here you can see people playing, hanging, eating, or just walking to work. Wherever they are, they give the place a certain character that immediately elevates it above its surrounding streets. It's less stressful and more lively at the same time. Then there are the car-free days, which they are really car-free mornings, as they happen usually twice per month on a Sunday from 7 to 10 a.m. But during this time it is really nice to see people jogging, walking, and even cycling in this quietude that you can't experience at any other time. These car-free days are also often connected to sport events and such. The fact that this country in Africa manages to do this when my hometown doesn't is really impressive, I would say. Even apart from these well-known aspects, there are also shortcuts in the form of stairs at some places that are explicitly for pedestrians. These are more hidden, but they go to show the consideration for pedestrians that must have gone into the planning. Now I could continue by talking about zoning and housing and maybe about how my university is like, but not everything has to be said in one video. When it comes to walkability, Kigali, especially in the context of Africa, is very advanced and even manages to compare and exceed what you might find in Europe. That said, there is always room for improvement, and of course, not everything is perfect.